cartoonist Steve Ditko's inventive art and narrative pathos paired with the vaudevillian stage presence of writer-editor Stan Lee to launch Spider-Man into the public consciousness. But despite their shared successes, Lee and Ditko's philosophies had long dueled behind the scenes. For Lee, art was entertainment. For Ditko, an adherent to the conservative and controversial philosophy of objectivism, art was a journey toward absolute personal and moral perfection.
Art creates a model, an ideal man as a measuring standard. Early comic book heroes were not about life as it is, but creations of how a man with a clear understanding of right and wrong and more courage chose to act, even if branded an outlaw. He dispensed a better justice than a pervading legal moral one. He was a moral avenger.
Distrusted, hunted, and feared, the more Ditko-esque take on Peter Parker's world often drove the narrative. But through his heavy-handed approach to filling word balloons, Lee was mostly able to impose his will.
We tried to bring comics a little more into the real world. The chances are that possibly even you and I aren't perfect. Today, most people just aren't. We tried to make our characters have feet of clay.
Lionized and vilified over the decades, a picture of the real Stan Lee would be painted in a tonal range of gray that would surely set the binary-minded Ditko spinning. And as a writer, Stan's Marvel method is an even messier smear, oft derided for the creative strangulation of his collaborators.
Hi, I'm Stan Lee.
Even a cursory glance at Stan's stage persona, the toupee and glasses, punchy catchphrases, and funky Flashman pimp suits, revealed a glaring refutation of one of Ditko's most core beliefs.
A is A. A thing is what it is. It has a specific nature and identity. The truth cannot contradict itself and also be a lie.
But oddly enough, is in the pages of Spider-Man, the work for which Lee is most widely and inaccurately given sole creative credit, that perhaps the case for his veto power is most justified. With an emphatic Dikembe Mutombo-style finger wag, Stan's self-aware dialogue tirelessly stepped up to spare readers and countless damn dirty hippie from Ditko's would-be highlight reel of right-handed windmill dunks. But though Lee had wrestled Spidey away from Ditko's ideals of exceptionalism, the pages of their other co-credited title were a very different battleground. Initially conceived of by Ditko as a 5-page solo story for the 1963 anthology Strange Tales, the master of the mystic arts was no confused teen. Robbed of his steady surgeon's hands and influencer status by fate, Dr. Stephen Strange's initial drive is not guilt or vengeance or altruism, but the desire to get back what's his. Only through the mastery of his craft is Strange finally set upon the path towards Marvel's mandated heroism. As Sorcerer Supreme, the gatekeeper of the occult, who relieves us of the burden of discerning evil from good.
He was not like everyone else, not the average, the common, or the ordinary man. He was the exceptional one, the uncommon one, the one doing what others were unwilling to do, regardless of the opposition and consequences to himself.
Garbing Dr. Strange in visuals that were vaguely satanic and overtly mystical and dreamlike, Ditko's art seemed to willfully defy Marvel's world outside your window ethos for realities conjured only by the power of his pen. As a result, Strange struck a chord with college kids of the 60s who loved Ditko's work so much they wanted to roll it up and smoke it. But references in the psychedelic rock and literature of a dropped-out youth and drug culture must have been a bittersweet notoriety for Ditko, who despite being as straight as an arrow fired by Nancy Reagan, had somehow tapped into something cosmically warped and hallucinatory. He must have wondered how. Maybe the gateway to psychedelia was a strange but organic cocktail of methodology, subject matter, and imagination. In the 60s world of binary ink on paper comics, the reduction and abstraction of reality into graphic shapes was the name of the game. With only 64 colors to choose from, photographic depictions were off limits, and color was often ultra-abstracted into mood and feeling. These pop art results are often innocuous or broadly appealing when applied to the world outside your window, but stories of a cosmic and supernatural nature inherently require a vast distortion, if not abandonment, of reality altogether. So when an extremely imaginative and talented artist like Ditko decides that his lines and shapes don't represent reality at all, well, that's when shit can get strange. Even if Stan Lee wasn't encouraging of Ditko's experimentation, there were still plenty of reasons to enable it. Ditko's approach to comics was thriving, a rising wave of popularity that gave Stan the perfect impetus, or excuse, to bathe in the adoration of the countercultures he met on his promotional college tours. Increasingly distracted, Stan's grip on the wheel loosened, allowing Ditko the agency and space to become even more assertive, innovative, and bold. A rare and mutual success that would only tear the rift between them wider.
Justice is objectively identifying a thing for what it is and treating it accordingly. No one gets the unearned.
For Ditko, Peter Parker entering college meant the time for excuses was done. But when he pushed hard for Spider-Man to mature into his vision of an objective hero, Lee first shut him down, and then shut him out. From Lee's vantage point, a man as philosophically rigid as Steve Ditko couldn't have been easy to talk to, especially in Stan's often compromised position as bridge between Marvel's creative staff and ownership. Now locked in a cold, silent war, often attributed to the same lack of credit, compensation, and control that fueled Lee's feud with Jack Kirby, the tightening of the perimeters around Ditko's philosophies would lead him to cast Stan's silence as cowardice. He now saw his work for Marvel, and with Lee with the same absolute vision as the rest of his worldview. Spider-Man was his work which demanded either the appropriate credit or none at all. His work with Stan Lee now untenable, Ditko felt morally obligated to walk away from Spider-Man. But what then would become of Dr. Strange? As Strange stood firm, dead center of a swirling, mystic psycho-sea, he became a thin metaphor for the kind of fortitude Ditko believed necessary to navigate the chaos of the 1960s. For someone who needs to bring about the world he believed in through art, idly watching the co-option of his extraordinary, idealized man must have felt like Bill Watterson stuck behind a urinating Calvin in traffic. Thus, in 1966, with the need for justice outweighed by his belief in self-actualization, Steve Ditko silently left Marvel. He'd taken the jobs, done and been paid for the work, and if someone objectively better suited were to come along and fill his shoes, they deserved the spot. With Ditko in what would become a lifelong retreat from the public eye, Lee was free to polish Spider-Man to a shine suiting his tastes. Either by mandate or simple demand, house styles at Marvel grew into favor, reducing much of Ditko's influence to subtextual tones and overt homages. But his stylistic influence transcends the superhero, leaving perhaps as great a mark on the indie cartoonists of the 90s, who worshipped the peculiarity and individuality in his work. As an essayist and indie cartoonist, his personal work is a large, self-published bibliography of unfettered, objectivist philosophy and vigilantism, a controversial, inventive, and lifelong statement.